The story begins with an elderly woman named Helga. Helga suffers from Alzheimer's, which makes it hard for her to remember much. It's nighttime. She starts to feel like there's someone behind the walls. Frightened, she calls the pest control department to report that she's been hearing strange noises in her home, like there's some kind of animal inside. A little while later, a man named Frank from the pest control department arrives at the building. He notices that a vehicle from another company is already parked outside. When he goes inside, he sees some strange liquid leaking out of the ventilation system, and it's giving off a strong, awful smell. Then he heads to Helga's apartment and asks why she called. Helga tells him that she heard some strange noises coming from her ceiling. Frank asks her about the two people who came earlier from the other company, since their vehicle is still parked outside, but Helga doesn't remember anything about them. Anyway, Frank starts inspecting the apartment. That's when he hears strange noises from the ceiling too. The sounds freak him out. He walks into one of the rooms and sees blood on the floor. Then he notices the ventilation chamber. When he shines his flashlight inside, he spots the dead body of a worker. It's the same guy whose van is parked outside. Seeing the corpse, Frank is completely shocked. But before he can escape, something appears in front of him and drags him straight into the ventilation system. Helga sees all of this happening. She's terrified. Now we go back a few days. We see a small meteor crashing down to Earth, right into the room of Helga's sister, Sylvia. From that meteor, an alien spider emerges. It's pretty big in size. That's when we're introduced to Charlotte, Helga's granddaughter. Charlotte lives in the apartment right next to her grandma's. She often sneaks into her grandma's place through the ventilation pipes, just to steal a few toys. Today she sneaks in again, quietly slipping into the apartment. That's when she notices the meteor. By now, the spider from earlier has shrunk in size. Charlotte thinks it looks cool, so she decides to keep it. Just then she hears Sylvia coming, so she quickly escapes back into the pipes. From there, she watches Helga, who's busy with something. Next door, there's a man named Eric who works as a biologist. Charlotte watches as Eric feeds the fish in his tank. When she finally gets back home, she finds Sylvia complaining to her dad about her. But the man she's talking to isn't Charlotte's real father. Sylvia is saying that Charlotte keeps sneaking into people's homes through the ventilation pipes, and that it's totally unacceptable. Van assures her that he'll talk to Charlotte about it. Van is Charlotte's stepfather. He's an artist and writes comics. But lately, work hasn't been going well. Because of that, there's a lot of tension at home, and their financial situation isn't great either. Charlotte goes back to her room. The first thing she does is place the spider into a glass jar. Just then, Thon walks in and asks if she went into Sylvia's apartment. Charlotte says no. Thon tells her to stay away from Sylvia. Right then, Charlotte's mom, Heather, calls her from outside. Heather has to go out for something, so she asks Charlotte to watch her little brother. But Charlotte isn't too fond of babysitting duties. So after her mom leaves, she heads right back into her room. She starts watching the spider closely. That's when a cockroach crawls across the table. Charlotte kills it, but before she can throw it away, the spider makes a weird sound. Hearing this, she drops the cockroach into the jar and the spider eats it in one quick bite. Charlotte is shocked because the cockroach was actually bigger than the spider itself. Meanwhile, we see Thon at another apartment fixing a drainage pipe for a woman named Maria. Maria lives in the same building. After finishing the job, Thon goes downstairs to check on the garbage compactor. Its gate isn't working properly, so he tries fixing it. Once that's done, he heads back home. Meanwhile, Charlotte keeps feeding the spider, killing more bugs and dropping them into the jar. Later, Charlotte goes to Thon's room where he's working on his comic. Charlotte loves his comics, especially the action figures he draws. She often gives him suggestions about what changes he should make to his characters. She tells him to make a few changes in the comic. Just then, Heather walks in and sees them together, and it makes her really happy. Because even though Charlotte likes Thon, she doesn't think of him as her real father. But Thon always tries to make sure Charlotte never feels the absence of one. That night, we see that Thon didn't really like Charlotte's suggestions, so he erases his drawing and starts over. He needs some inspiration for his character. So he walks into Charlotte's room. There he notices some spider sketches on her desk, and then he sees the actual spider in the jar. He's surprised, because he's never seen a spider like that before. But before he can focus on it any further, Charlotte walks in. She tells Thon that if he doesn't like her ideas, he can just say so, which means she saw him erasing her suggestions from the drawing. Thon feels really bad about it. Later that night, after Charlotte falls asleep, the spider somehow escapes from the jar. It crawls straight into the ventilation pipe. Meanwhile, over at Helga's apartment, her pet parrot starts panicking, scared by something it sees. The next morning, Heather tells Thon that she really doesn't like living in this apartment, but Thon doesn't have enough money for them to move somewhere else. While they're talking about it, they suddenly hear Sylvia screaming. They rush toward her apartment, and once inside, they find that Sylvia's parrot has been brutally killed. All its feathers are gone, and something had cut into its body with incredible precision. Sylvia assumes it must have been a rat, so she calls Frank for help. But after looking at the bird, Frank realizes this couldn't have been the work of a rat. He says whatever did this was a much smaller creature, and it carved through the bird with surgical precision. Back in Charlotte's room, she hears the sound of a cat, but it's coming from the spider's jar. She's stunned. The spider can mimic different sounds. Now Charlotte starts bringing it a bunch of cockroaches to eat. But then, by accident, a mothball falls near the spider. The moment it sees the mothball, the spider gets scared, and Charlotte realizes that it's afraid of it. When she brings the mothball closer to the jar, the spider's web catches fire, which means this thing could actually kill the spider. Meanwhile, Frank starts spraying pest control chemicals throughout the building. When it's time to spray Charlotte's room, she stops him. Frank asks why, and Charlotte tells him about the spider. He's shocked. He tells her why don't you just get a dog or a cat instead? Spiders aren't pets. He explains, spiders only do two things, kill and eat. But Charlotte insists that it's her friend and it won't hurt her. Frank leaves and then goes to Sylvia to ask for his payment. Sylvia only gives him half. Later that night, we see the spider once again escape from the jar. It crawls through the ventilation pipes and makes its way into Maria's apartment. Maria was sitting there reminiscing about her family. Her dog was with her, and it sensed something was wrong. The dog tried to warn her, barking loudly, but Maria got annoyed with all the noise and ended up putting the dog outside. Now, just as she was about to take her medicine and go to sleep, the spider attacked. Maria slipped and hit her head on the sink, leaving her paralyzed. Then the alien spider crawled into her body so it could start eating her organs. The next morning, she asked her mom if she could go visit Eric, the biologist who lived next door. Dan immediately said no. He thought Eric was a weird guy and told Charlotte to stay away from him. But Charlotte didn't listen and went to see Eric anyway. She explained that the spider had some really unique abilities. Eric was stunned. He told her, normal spiders don't have all these features. Spiders don't grow this fast, and this one could be dangerous. But Charlotte didn't care. Eric told her he wanted to observe it more closely, so she agreed to let him keep the spider for a few hours. After she left, Eric began feeding the spider different kinds of bugs. Meanwhile, Thon hears a strange noise coming from the home's ventilation system. When he opens it to check, he finds Maria's dog inside. He decides to return the dog to her apartment, but when he gets there, he sees the front door already wide open. The dog starts barking loudly, and sensing something's wrong, Thon steps inside. What he sees next leaves him shocked, Maria's lifeless body lying right in front of him. He immediately calls the police. They arrive and take the body away, but no one can figure out how she was killed. That's when Eric sees an opportunity. He calls Thon over to his place to finally tell him the truth about Charlotte's spider. After listening to Eric, Thon realizes just how dangerous that spider really is. He rushes back home and scolds Charlotte, but she refuses to believe her spider could hurt anyone. She snaps back, "You're not my dad," then loses his temper too. He yells, "Your father abandoned you. He has a new home right here in this very town, but he never even tries to visit you. I'm the one who's here for you, here." She always believed her father lived in another city. That's why he never came to see her. Now, in tears, Charlotte runs to her room, then immediately realizes he went too far. As Charlotte sits alone flipping through his comic book, she gets angry and throws it outside in frustration. Later that night, while everyone's asleep, we see that in Eric's room, the spider has eaten all the fish in the tank, and now it's grown even bigger and far more dangerous. Meanwhile, Hyder is with her mom, Helga, who tells her she's knitted sweaters for the children and asks her to deliver them. Than is busy with some work in the building when Sylvia storms in and starts yelling at him, accusing him of never doing anything right. Back in her room, Charlotte is with Maria's dog when suddenly the dog starts barking at the ventilation pipe. At the same time, Sylvia is searching for her cat. She hears faint meowing coming from the vent, but the moment she leans in to check, the spider lunges at her. Over at home, Thon is fuming. In a fit of rage, he even smashes the TV. Turns out his project got rejected, something he had spent years working on. Hyder, frustrated too, begins arguing with him. Their shouting turns into a full-blown fight. Seeing this, Charlotte grabs her little brother and takes him to her room, putting on headphones so they wouldn't hear the yelling. But while Thon and Hyder are still fighting, the spider sneaks in, and before they can even react, it viciously attacks them and drags them into the ventilation pipes. Charlotte steps out shortly after, but because of her headphones, she didn't hear a thing. Soon, she notices blood around the vent chamber, and panic sets in. She searches the house for her parents, but no one's there. That's when Charlotte realizes what the spider has done. She remembers the spider is afraid of mothballs. Just then, the spider returns, and this time it takes her little brother too. Charlotte is helpless to stop it. Without wasting time, she gets to work grinding mothballs into powder, mixes it with water, and loads it into her water gun. Then she climbs into the ventilation system, determined to save her family. She goes to Eric's place for help, but he's already been killed by the spider. So now she rushes to her grandmother Helga's apartment. To her relief, Helga is perfectly fine. The spider hasn't touched her. That's when Charlotte catches a familiar scent coming from Helga's sweater, the same smell as mothballs. Helga always kept them in her pockets to repel insects, and that's the reason the spider never harmed her. Charlotte tells Helga not to take off the sweater and instructs her to call the police as soon as the phone signal comes back. But since Helga suffers from memory loss, she mistakenly calls Frank instead. Meanwhile, Thon regains consciousness and finds himself trapped in a spider web, with Sylvia also caught beside him. He tries to rescue her, but before he can do anything, the web snaps, and Sylvia falls straight down. Determined to fight back, Charlotte gathers all the mothballs from Helga's house, grinds them into powder, and stores the mixture in small bottles. She hears a sound coming from the ventilation, and upon opening it, discovers Thon trapped inside. She quickly pours some of the liquid on him, which melts the web and sets him free. Just then, the spider shows up and attacks Charlotte, but she sprays it with the same mothball liquid, and it retreats in fear. At that moment, Frank enters the building, bringing us back to the very scene we saw at the beginning of the movie. The spider goes after him too, but Frank defends himself with a nail gun, momentarily driving it away. However, the nails damage a pipe, causing water to leak, which dilutes the mothball mixture, reducing its effectiveness. The spider returns and captures Frank, dragging him away. Then notices that Hyder and the baby are stuck inside a garbage container. He rushes in and uses the last of the mothball water to protect them, but now they're all trapped, and the spider is closing in. Then remembers the container door is electronic and runs to shut it. However, the plug is loose, and when he tries to fix it, he gets electrocuted and collapses. Just before the spider can attack, Charlotte hits the button and the spider is crushed beneath the heavy door. Hyder immediately begins giving CPR to Thon, and miraculously, he survives. Overwhelmed with emotion, Charlotte hugs him and calls him Dad for the first time. Hearing this, Thon gets emotional too, and the entire family embraces each other, believing the nightmare is finally over. But in the final scene of the movie, we see the spider's body was filled with eggs, and one of them hatches.